Part 2. My mother drove us back to California and took me straight to the ER, where they had to figure out what was going on. MRI, CT, blood draws, all the same stuff. I had to get a stomach tube put in, and I had to do tube feeding fully since I lost my ability to swallow again. This was all from radiation, and my whole left side lost function. My neck lost all strength, and I had minimal strength on my right side of my body. At this point, I just had to wait for the radiation poisoning to get through my body and stop affecting my function. I had to take swallowing therapy, which sucked so much because when they put a tube down my nose for breathing, they must have put it in wrong because it was stabbing the back of my throat and it felt like swelling and a knife grazing the bottom of my oropharynx or near there. I couldn't cough or comfortably swallow, and I kept trying to tell them it's not my fault. They did take it out, but the damage was done and my throat was so painful. I ended up asking for throat spray to numb the pain, and it started to help, but suddenly I guess my oxygen was going down and my heart rate was going up pretty drastically. I apparently was allergic to lidocaine and had no idea which was in the throat spray. Actually, the lidocaine was the tipping point for all of the medications I had been taking. My body was shutting down. Within 10 minutes, there were about 5 nurses in my room and a cool machine. I ended up having to go through a blood infusion with methylene blue, and it sucked because it was like getting an IV of ice, which I pointed out because it was painful, but I couldn't move. So as I was squirming, the nurses asked if I was okay, and I said, "No, it's really cold and hurts. Is this normal?" "Well, we've never done this on someone that's awake, so good to know." I handled it, but as much as being awake sucked, they needed to do it fast because I was having a severe bodily shutdown. I will say my IV did look really cool seeing all of the dark blue, but it got me back to healthy again considering I was still unable to really move my body. This time was fuzzy to me because I was in critical condition and I was really out of it. I ended up back in my room for a couple days and they had to remove the nutrition tube in my nose and perform a surgical procedure to put a feeding tube into my stomach. It was another week or 2 as they monitored my feeding tube and my digestion. Once I was strong enough, I was transferred to a post-acute facility to help take care of me since I needed bolus feeding or feeding from a timed machine. I thought overall this was a good idea because I didn't want to put that stress on my mom, but it wasn't the best idea because the nursing was very lacking and they would constantly lay me flat even though they weren't supposed to, because being on stomach feeding, it can cause vomiting, which it did, and then they would leave me in my vomit for an hour with no help. It really sucked, but the older nurses would come in finally and really clean me up. This facility, I had heard, has high turn, over which is always bad, but they did have great physical therapists, and they would take me to the workout room in a high back wheelchair to sit, which after a while would hurt because I didn't have the muscle in my back to bring my neck up, let alone sit. But I liked hanging out with them even after my sessions because they would listen to K-pop with me and joke. It put me in good spirits even if I could barely move on my own. Eventually the nurses did take me into a shower, but it wasn't very nice. And she sprayed water directly into my trach, so it made me aspirate and I was coughing. My lungs sounded popcorn. Like again, and when I got back to my room, there were 3 EMTs ready to take me to the hospital, which I thought was weird because I only needed to cough and sit for a bit and I would have been fine, but I guess they were just being careful or they were sick of me. Not sure. I ended up at Fountain Valley Hospital and they were pretty much like, "Why are you here?" But they checked my breathing and offered to run scans and keep me overnight, but my mother could tell I was all right and had me taken back the post-acute facility. The second time I aspirated because the constant laying down and inconsistency in care. My mother had to come and monitor me and had to beg to have me taken to the ER. I was at Fountain Valley this time for a week or so, and I got a CT and an MRI. My oxygen and blood gases were critical, but I was able to breathe with a full oxygen face mask. It took over a week for my lungs to begin to function enough to be transported back to my own hospital. During that week, many doctors visited me and asked my mother for my history. They couldn't understand why I had survived so long with a brainstem glioblastoma. Doctors even asked my mother why I wasn't on a DNR because they assumed I would die. I always knew it was not my time to go. So I got transferred to Kaiser Permanente and I was so happy, even though we met some pretty cool doctors in Fountain Valley that were fascinated with my condition. In Kaiser, I did get better care. I was also able to make friends with some of my nurses. I was slowly getting better and I did have to take more swallowing tests, which was still hard because I wasn't allowed to drink water or chew ice on my own, but I got so mad because the ice was so soothing to my sore throat. I ended up finding a way to get a small bits of ice and practice swallowing on my own and passed my last swallowing test the day that I left. I finally got to go home again, but this time I was in a hospital bed. Being back at home was very comforting and good for my health. We ended up having an attendant come in almost every day, and it was interesting meeting so many new people. Some worked well and some didn't, but one nurse will always be a great friend of mine, like a brother. I am actually now the godmother of his child, and I am very blessed to have met him. I just laid in my hospital bed day to day with consistent physical therapy and stretches until my strength came back. The biggest change started when I got a new physical therapist named Lynn, and she hauled my ass out of bed and held me as I stood with her assistance. And my body slowly but surely started to come back. Eventually, we used a lift to take me out of bed, got me into a high-back wheelchair, and I would go to the front door area and just sit there with my mom and nurse. It got to a point where I could slowly lift my neck little by little. I eventually was able to lift myself off the bed and sit on my arms for a second, but day to day I tried my hardest to see a little bit more progression. It used to hurt to set my foot on the ground in a 90-degree standing position, and it felt so raw. Standing on my feet, my left arm felt like trying to lift or move. It was impossible, but now I go to the gym 5 days a week and lift weights. I used to have to use a bedpan and tube feeding, but now I am capable of walking to the bathroom and doing everything myself, and occasionally cooking a meal for my mom and I. I am finally capable of doing so much more for myself, and have gained so many friends, strength within myself, and a new happiness for life. My mom was my number one champ in all of this. There wasn't one point in this that she wasn't there. Same for my bestie, she would always text me back when I had hand function. She came and painted my nails, brought me food, slippers, and a blow dryer. They were both my rocks through this whole hard time. And of course, my amazing siblings that showed up for me in the scariest and hardest times. Love and appreciate all of you. Thank you for listening to the main chunk of my health journey. If you would like to hear more about my recuperation portion, then I will also make a video about that. Also, I am making these videos mostly for my general public when I don't have a chance to tell them everything. But if you are from the depths of the internet, then please enjoy and ask questions if you please. But I am doing this anonymously, so please understand that some things I may not be comfortable with answering. And please, if you know me in person, do not share any information about me on here. Thank you all.